why do they get so personal about it? Like what is it really doing to them for you to give somebody advice? Like what the hell does that have to do with anything?
I've told all these dietitians, you're talking to the person that was frantically trying different diets to make sure the IBS could go away. So like I did the raw vegan diet for a bit. I tried just a regular vegan diet. I watched the Game Changers propaganda and got screwed after that. Like I was able to try all these different diets. The vegan diet, I lost close to 12 pounds of muscle. Sure, I was lean, but I had nothing on me. My stomach felt worse than it ever had.
Welcome to the Plant-Free MD podcast with Dr. Anthony Chaffee, where we discuss diet and nutrition and how this affects health and chronic disease, and show you how you can use this to optimize your health and happiness, both mentally and physically. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Plant-Free MD podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Chaffee, and today I have a very special guest, Mr. Brandon Loschiavo, who is joining me all the way from the States and in the middle of training for the Olympic trials. Brandon, thank you so much for coming on. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. I've been super excited. Ever since we jumped on a podcast, you came on mine. My mom's been obsessed with all of your content. So she's been,
Oh, nice.
Did you watch this one? What about this one? It's incredible. I've been eating more meat, by the way. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, nice. Oh, that's really good. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an honor. I'm excited to jump on this podcast and chat.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you for having me on your podcast as well. That was a lot of fun. So I'm glad that we could meet up again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nice to actually have some like logic and some like really solid foundations and reasoning behind why we should be, integrating more animal foods. So yeah, it was a fun podcast to have. Definitely adds to my, education side of why I'm doing what I'm doing for sure.
Yeah, great.
Big help.
Yeah. Well, to that end, can you give us a bit about you and what you do and obviously your athletics and nutritional
Yeah.
stylings for that.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Brandon Loschiavo. I am a 2020, or you can say 2021 Olympic finalist on 10-meter platform. I have tried many diets, but ended up on an animal-based diet, which has kind of really helped a lot of my stomach problems, which is kind of the main one was like IBS. If we're going to just keep going with some diving accolades, I'm a NCAA champion, 3-time Big Ten champion, and then multinational champion. But something that has helped me a lot is changing to the animal-based diet. I did full carnivore for about 6 to 8 months, and then reintegrating some fruit after that. But I did notice, and we'll definitely get into this, I did notice for those 6 to 8 months, it actually felt pretty important that I did those before I went on an animal-based diet, because that was the only thing that finally took my stomach to like a neutral position. The past with my IBS was kind of a rough time for me because it started in probably middle school is when it started getting really bad. And this would be from, I thought I was lactose intolerant for a super long time. Depending on the spice of the food, I'd be curled up in bed for a day or two and I would have to skip school because it would get that bad. There was a lot of fear around food. Thankfully, because of the animal-based diet I am on now, I kind of have a rule of thumb is 90-10 or 95-5. So I will be, everything I bring into my house is animal-based. That's just like a non-negotiable for me. But outside of that, so like 1 to 2 meals a week maximum, I can eat whatever the hell I want. And that's usually how it works for me. And it's how I've been able to keep my stomach in check, we'll say. Because if I start going past the 95-5 or 90-10 rule for me, I start to feel like some sort of regression back to, the old IBS symptoms.
Nice. And do you notice any difference like when you have those outside meals and how you feel like obviously if you go too far then you get the IBS back again, but other feelings, getting sore, getting a bit more tired or any other changes, or you feel pretty good?
No, yeah, I know what I'm doing. Like it definitely doesn't feel great, but it's just like nice to kind of like sometimes let that go. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny. I was just talking to my girlfriend last night about this. It's so funny. You can eat these foods and there's a almost an instant recognition of what you just did, just based off of how heavy, it takes a long time to digest, versus like an animal-based meal. I could have the largest meal of my life, and I walk out of that meal feeling phenomenal. I feel better after I've had it.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's pretty quick. I don't know necessarily about soreness. That'd be a hard one. I would actually have to test that, which is something I always like to do with all of the diets, and we can go over how many different diets that I've tried. But yeah, I think every weekend I'm kind of sore because we have so much training towards the back
Mhm.
end of the week anyways. So that's just kind of like as of recently we have two practices Friday with a strength training session. So like Saturday is, I just know I'm not going to feel amazing just from all of that like being beat up. But yeah, I haven't noticed anything really long term, but the day after I definitely feel, stomach wise, I almost like to call it like a little bit slower. Like the processing speed just doesn't feel as good.
Mhm.
And that's something I've been like pretty hyper aware. And that's the part that sucks about like, um, not this diet, but having to deal with the IBS stuff. Cause when I go outside of my own confinements and I go to a competition, let's say I was just in China, for example, a
Mhm.
few weeks ago, and that was something that I had to deal with. It always catches up to me the last day. And especially when I get high nerves, the IBS kind of has that tendency to speak up a little bit. And so in China, that my day of the competition, I was struggling with some IBS
Mhm.
symptoms and stuff like that. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, not great when you're performing or in the pool.
nah, no, it sucks. Yeah, I used to have to travel with packets, not just like one or two, but packets of Imodium, and I would
Mhm.
know every time I would go on these trips, I'm taking 1 to 2 of them a day,
Mm.
which
Yeah.
was horrible because then you just feel bloated and stuffed up 24/7.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that sucks. When
Yeah.
when you were on like the full 6 month of just carnivore, when was that?
So that was probably around, I really started making the transition around 2020, 2021, because I was just so sick of dealing with the stomach issues. So it was like after slash during COVID, I started like really getting into the idea of it. And then 2021, I really like leaned into it. So yeah, once I came back here, I did full carnivore. I actually don't think I did it that great, and you can kind of correct me if we go over it, on how I did it. But yeah, I did it for about roughly 6 months straight.
Nice.
Yeah.
And yeah. So what do you mean you don't think you did it correct?
Okay, so it's like based off of what I was hearing, because this was my like deep Paul Saladino phase. This is
Mm.
when he was doing, I think he was just Carnivore MD back then. I think
Mhm.
that was his initial like Instagram name. But I was like, okay, I need fatty meat because I need the calories. Um, but I was picking like really shitty meat, which
Mm.
I don't know if that necessarily kind of like I was buying chuck roast. I was eating like 2 to 3 pounds of chuck roast.
It's
But
fine.
like really thick. Okay, yeah, if that's fine, that's fine. But like
Yeah.
maybe I think it was, and you can correct me here, but because my stomach was kind of going through something
Mhm.
and it was trying to like regress. And this is kind of like a weird, I don't know if this was a symptom or, something I was just dealing with at the time, but like I noticed like armpit sweat was smelt really bad.
Mm.
And like eating a lot of chuck roast, and I think like that much fat was kind of like bothering my stomach, but I
Mhm.
just kept doing it because I knew like long term it would kind of like level out. Um, I didn't get like the, excuse my language, but like Joe Rogan talks about like getting the shits when he does carnivore. I
Disaster
never really,
pants.
yeah, like
Yeah.
I never really got that when I was doing the whole chuck roast, but
Mhm.
um, I think if I leaned towards doing like a New York strip or like a ribeye,
Mhm.
I kind of like, I don't know if it just feels like a little bit less fat
Mhm.
compared because like the chuck roast has so much fat. You're just sitting there chewing through all of that, and it just felt like a little bit too much.
Mm,
But yeah, that was like the protocol. I kind of felt like the armpits were really sweaty, and I just didn't feel like I smelt that great. But like once I got past that 6 months and my like stomach kind of felt like it leveled off, I reintegrated eggs, and then I brought in some fruits. So I brought in like blueberries, and then a little bit of I started playing with some raw honey,
mhm,
and that was starting to work well now. And then my diet's changed quite a bit now comparative to then,
mhm.
but that was kind of my diet back then. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I mean, I certainly don't think you do anything wrong by eating chuck roast as long as you feel good with it. You know, if it's a little too
yeah,
much fat for you, then, certainly cut back on it. But, well, there's nothing wrong with chuck roast though. It's still good meat though, you know?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I actually just had it last night. I think it was definitely how I prepared it too.
Hmm.
Because I was just cooking. I was using. I didn't know back then, but I was just cooking it on like high heat with olive oil and just
Hmm.
running through that. And then
Yeah.
so it felt like it was like too much grease. And so that part was just kind of affecting me.
Yeah.
Potentially that's kind of I felt like it was a little bit too much, but
Mm.
I had chuck roast last night. I actually just cut it into smaller pieces and then I air fried it.
Mm.
Um and then, I put some seasonings on there, a little bit of lemon pepper and salt, and it was
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Cooking in the olive oil could cause some issues as well, just because when you
Okay.
when you cook with the olive oil, it can oxidize and very quickly, and it can be pretty upsetting to your stomach as
Yeah.
well. So that's something to think about too. Do you cook with
Yeah.
olive oil now, or you sort of gone through that phase?
Yeah, I don't. What I will do, and again, I feel like this podcast would answer some of my like remaining questions that I do
Hmm.
have, but I know that cooking with olive oil at high heats is not great for you. So I'll drizzle on a little bit after. So I
Hmm.
don't cook with it, but I'll just put it on a little bit after,
Hmm.
just for like a little bit of flavor. But yeah, I don't cook with it anymore.
Yeah, that's good. The
Yeah.
the olive oil oxidizes on its own. And so
Okay.
some studies have shown that it can take as little as 6, 7 days after pressing that they oxidize in the bottle. So it's really important to sort of
Mm.
get it fresh and then stick it in the fridge and then use it cold, just like you do
Uh,
there.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. So there
Yeah.
has to be like more that's the annoying part. And this is something I've like really recognized. Uh all of these things that you have to like put so many extra little details in,
Mhm.
which is it's not the worst thing in the world, but I think that was like the hard part. Like I don't know, I'm thinking of like a random thing like broccoli, for example. It's like you
Mhm.
have to cook it, you have to clean it perfectly. You have to buy the right one. You have to make sure you're cooking it perfectly. And then hopefully it doesn't affect your stomach in
Mhm.
all of these ways. And you're like, maybe I just don't. Maybe I just
Yeah.
don't eat
Yeah.
it. Just skip it.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, that's good to know because I knew the smaller ones were better, so you didn't have it for an extended period of time.
Mhm.
It's good to buy the olive oil from a singular spot, so it's not from a bunch of different places. And
Mhm.
then hopefully you're buying one that's not seed oil, like a bunch of seed oils. I saw some big scandal that came out.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So yeah, I
Yeah.
took it out for a really long time though.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Do
I'm fine
you,
taking it out again.
yeah. Well, I mean, it might be a good experiment just to sort of see sort of how that affects you.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, when you were doing just like that 6 months of just straight up meat, with a bit of olive oil, whatever, did you notice difference in your soreness then from your training, or not really?
It's kind of hard. If I were to compare it now versus when I was eating just a regular diet of
Hmm.
when my and I can't wait to get into this, but when my, like dietitians and stuff, I'm
Hmm.
I'm eating pasta in between practices and I'm getting the great
Yeah.
it's more so, and maybe this does play into soreness, but energy throughout the day.
Hmm.
It's just like started becoming more consistent that I wouldn't completely dip in between practices.
Yeah.
It's like I would eat pasta or I would have like a big sandwich and I would crash right
Mm.
after it, like having that much carbs. And then I would get into the next practice and feel like I'd have to completely re-ramp back up, like I just woke up.
Mm.
Um, and I don't know if that's just me specifically that runs into that issue, but my God, I just could not. every time after that second practice, I was like, I need some form of stimulant to like get me back going.
Hmm.
And I could kind of buy that because like that was when my injuries were the worst though. So I could kind of agree once I got onto a carnivore diet in the first place, recovery got a lot easier. So patellar tendonitis, my fat pads aren't just like like constantly inflamed. So like overall inflammation and just being able to recover even when I have these, that 5%, 10% when I go eat one bad meal, I still recover a million times better than I used to. So in that aspect, 100% I agree. That's just like without a doubt for sure.
Nice. Well,
Yeah.
that's great. Yeah, well, yeah, we should get into that, like what we were eating before. But the reason I ask is because like I just I don't get sore anymore. But that's with getting rid of all coffee, all everything
Oh,
besides.
even coffee.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, I was sore for 2 days after drinking a cup of coffee after working out. So I'm like, no, not doing that again.
Okay.
And like a doctor I worked with, he's orthopedic surgeon here, and we went to the gym together, and we are doing like, I had him go through like my workout, and I was really pushing it. And he's like, oh well, I'm in surgery tomorrow. I don't want to go too hard because I don't want to be sore. And I was just like, look, you're on carnivore. You've been carnivore for a month. Like you won't be sore as long as you've been strict. So it's on you. Have you been strict? He's like, yeah, yeah, definitely. It's like, then you won't be sore. And he's just like looking at me up really skeptically. And so, we did the whole workout. He's like, all right, I'm really interested. I'm really interested to see if you're right on this. And I'm like, well, I'm really interested to see if you've actually been staying strict. And it's like, it will be if you have. And next day, we were in the OR bumping each other. He's like, I really wanted you to be wrong. I really wanted to wake up today just sore as hell. He's like, but I'm not. I'm not sore at all. And it pissed me off. I wanted you to be wrong,
Mm.
but not. I'm not sore at all. I was like, yeah, it's kind of cool, isn't it? He's like, yeah, it's crazy. We sort of sitting down. There's like we're all in break, and one of the med reps came through and bought coffee for everyone. I declined, and he was having some coffee, and I didn't say anything. I was just watching him, and sort of like 10 minutes into it, 15 minutes, he's like, hey, actually, I'm feeling a bit sore. Actually, I'm kind of sore through my chest and sort of like down my arms. And I just pointed at the coffee and said, what are you drinking? He's like, oh, damn it. You think that's it? I'm like, yes. Like you weren't sore 10 minutes ago. Now you're sore. What do you think it is? It's
Yeah.
like, now you're going to be sore for the next 2 days. And he's like, damn it. So yeah, it's uh it's weird. It's weird, but like just those little bits of inflammation, from these things. It's surprising. It's surprising,
Yeah.
that's what I talked about, like the last sort of bits you get, really those last little remnants of this stuff, and it just gets so much inflammation out of your body. It's like it's a big difference. So that's what, yeah, I was wondering if you had tried that, because I certainly noticed a huge difference. And then other athletes that I've spoken to, like that's like their favorite part is that they do like a big competition, a big training, and the next day they could do it again,
Yeah.
and they're not held back by it.
I did notice when I was going more strict recently. I was making sure that I was doing ground meat in the morning, and then I would just do like a pound of ribeye or whatever at night. I did feel really clean, and that did keep me. I was having coffee and stuff like that, but I definitely felt like I was recovering faster, and
Mm,
I did notice it because you're looking for in athletics when we're at this high, you're not looking for a 10% change. You're looking for 1 to 2.
mhm.
And I don't know, do you eat eggs?
Yeah, yeah, sometimes.
Um, the switch to it, like having ground meat in the morning, I definitely felt like I did feel a little bit better.
Mhm,
Energy wise too, I definitely felt like I could maintain because that's what I'm always like. That's something I'm hyper vigilant of is am I getting into my afternoon practice and am I feeling like a mental and physical dip halfway through? That's where
mhm,
I start to like kind of notice it. That's definitely I like because I eat 6 eggs in the morning. So
mhm,
it's like I'll have 6 eggs in the morning. I'll have some sort of fruit, so like frozen mangoes or some blueberries, and then maybe like a little bit of raw honey.
mhm,
Um, and that's usually kind of like a meal first for me. And that usually keeps me pretty consistent. But with the ground meat, it did feel like obviously feel a little bit heavier, so I have to watch out on how much I do eat because
mhm.
my whole sport's predicated on how light do I feel.
Yeah.
Because like you mentally feel like I can compress, and maybe we can kind of show some video of what that looks like to the people. But I have to be able to compress like as quickly as possible. So if you kind of feel full, like this used to
Mm.
happen to me if I went to like fucking Chipotle, and I would just feel so heavy. I would feel so heavy. I was like, oh, this is not a good idea. So making sure I'm eating soon enough and the right things usually makes that kind of like possible, like a hell of a lot more possible when it's coming into that compression.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that makes sense. And I don't know, did you have some stuff you could pop up or on what you talking about, like some of the diving stuff?
yeah, I didn't know if that was possible, but
Yeah.
I mean maybe you can do that exteriorly, or I'll
Oh,
send you
dude.
some videos.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Send me some.
yeah,
We'll click it
yeah,
in.
I'll
Yeah,
oh okay. Yeah, I'll send you a few things. But
yeah.
uh, um yeah, just for people to kind of get an idea of what that looks like, and that will just kind of give you an idea of why I kind of need to feel light.
So yeah, so you're talking about like changing that 1 to 2%. Like I would be willing to say that if you like you go to just that ground beef and meat sort of thing and just do
Yeah,
that, like you'd get not 1 to 2%. I'd say you get 15-20% out of that, and you wouldn't get
yeah,
sore anymore. But you'd have to drop coffee, and you'd have to
yeah.
drop the olive oil as well, because all of those
Okay.
things can add to it. If you just
Yeah,
go like beef and water, or just meat and water and just nothing else, like
yeah,
I think you'd find you'd have a big change. um serious market improvement, not just a couple percentage, and you would not be sore anymore, certainly not in that same way. You sort of feel like, yeah, I've sort of worked out, but it wouldn't be sore, it wouldn't be stiff. You could do it again, no problem. And the other thing is that, yeah, you're right. Like you don't want to eat a big meal of meat before you work out. Definitely not. You
yeah,
want to wait until after your training, and then have something. And if you're doing like 2 a days, 3 a day, something like that, you just got to have sort of a bit of a smaller meal afterwards. And you have to give like a lot of space, or even just not eat until after, and then you sort of refeed on the subsequent days. But yeah, it could, because it could just make you naturally lethargic. If you have a big meal of meat, you're just going to have blood's dedicated down to your intestines, and it's just going to slow you down. Your body's going to say like, hey, what are we doing, what are we working for? We already got food. Like, no,
yeah,
chill that, spend the
yeah,
day in the sun. So yeah, you definitely need to. I always would fast on competition and training days. um, I often would just naturally eat, maybe sort of earlier in the day, but it'd be a good five. Try to keep it like 5 hours between eating and training, and I wouldn't eat that much during the day,
mm,
and then eat like a big thing afterwards. And
yeah.
that seemed to work for me. And then on game days, just did not eat at all. Never ate.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, so when I was just doing the ground beef, that did feel good.
Hmm.
I was probably doing probably 6 to 8 ounces. I
Hmm.
feel like it was pretty light. It
Hmm.
wasn't too much, and that felt fine.
Yeah,
Um, but then at night I would make sure I get like a pound, if not a little bit more than that.
yeah.
That's like for me every day. That's like my non-negotiable is like I'm having a pound of red meat at night.
Nice.
That's what we're doing, and that always feels super good to me. But what are your thoughts then on um like would that even play into dairy products too? Would you completely take that out?
Except for butter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
because
yeah.
usually in the morning I'll have whole milk with a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of Celtic salt,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll throw in creatine. And sometimes I'll add in a little bit of maple syrup because
Mm-hmm.
Paul Saldino, thank you for that. But like that's like my healthy pre-workout
Mm-hmm.
would be that drink, and then I'll have a meal after that next practice,
Mhm.
which would be like the 6 eggs and some fruit, and then I would have my second practice, and then I would have my pound of meat. So I'm usually done eating around anywhere from 3:30 to
Mm.
5:30, depending on when I end practice. And again, like that was a big part for me, is actually giving my stomach time to digest. If I'm eating too late at night, I feel horrible.
Mm.
I feel terrible. So like having that time to digest coming into the next day, I usually feel pretty ready to eat.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey everyone, really happy to announce a new sponsor for the show and for everybody down in Australia. It's Stockman Steaks, who are delivering high quality grass fed and finished pasture raised beef and other meats, flash frozen and vacuum sealed to your door, something that I've been enjoying a lot of myself recently as well. They also have a great range of specialty items such as high fat keto mince and carnivore beef and organs mince with liver, kidneys, and beef heart as well. So use code Chaffee today for a free order of beef mince or another specialty gift along with your order at stockmansteaks.com.au, and I'll see you over there. Thanks, guys. Yeah, I'd probably cut out the milk, especially just because there's enough carbs that it can spike your insulin, and then you get out of ketosis, and you actually, Paul doesn't like being in ketosis. I do like being in ketosis. I've been in ketosis
Yeah.
for better part of a decade now, and it actually feels
Yeah.
great. And that's when I have the most energy. And so, especially for when you're training, I mean, that's what you want. You want to be able to tap into your body's resources and your fat stores. This is work from Professor Tim Noakes down in South Africa. He was all about, like, as an athlete, you have to have carbs, 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 because that was just the teaching of the time. And he was just that was what he learned. And so he was, propagating that. And then he realized, like 15 years ago, like, damn it, I was wrong. And he could have just retired, a very, very successful, very influential, uh, uh, doctor and writer. He wrote a bunch of books. They were selling well. He had no problems. He could have just kicked back. But he spent the last 15 years trying to undo his own legacy
Mm,
and go against all the things that he's been pushing out. And people are saying, no, 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 no. You need carbs because look at this paper. It's like written by him. And he's just like, yeah, that was wrong. Now it's this. So, they're trying to disprove him with his own work. It's like, no, that's not how that works. And he's done crossover trials with athletes where they have carb fueled athlete and a keto athlete, and give them like 42 days to get customized fat adapted. But they said that it really didn't take more than 3 weeks for anybody. But so 42 days is what they gave them, and they had the big high performance endurance, all these sorts of things, and they could both compete at the same level, carbs or fat adapted, right?
mm,
But the fat adapted ones were tapped into their fat, and so they never crashed, they never ran out, and they didn't have to refuel. And then they did swap over, so it was a crossover trial, and they did the carb athletes went keto and the keto went carbs, and again 42 days to reacclimate. I found the exact same thing. They didn't have any up or down in their performance on the sort of the upfront, but then the keto people could just keep going, right?
mm.
But there's no that's one of the things that people say is like, well, yes, they'll say either one, whichever one they do, they'll say that's impossible. It's the other one, right? If it's like high performance, like sprinting, uh, you know, or like endurance, whatever it is, it's that one isn't possible. Oh yes, well it works for sprinting, but it wouldn't work for endurance because you're not going to replenish your glycogen and all that sort of stuff. And but no, it does. So you have the exact same output, except you just keep going. You never run
Yeah.
out. And there's actually studies looking at athletes with glycogen. They found that fat fueled athletes replenish their glycogen faster than carb fueled athletes, sucking down sugar, water, and gels and things like that. So it's a huge performance advantage. I certainly noticed that. I played, 10 years high level rugby before medical school, and then kept playing rugby. 5 of those years was on just zero carb carnivore, and 5 were on just a normal whole food, homemade omnivorous diet, mostly
Mm.
meat and vegetables and salad, because I was supposed to eat salad. And that was sort of the only thing, the only reason. Not much carbs, not much anything else. Night and day difference, just night and day difference. I mean, I have some bread or this and that, but but it wasn't like a main. I wasn't like going out just buying sacks of bread and pasta. every now and then I went through like some phases where I'd have some like whole wheat pasta because you're supposed to. It was just easy, and I was doing
Yep.
that when I was studying for the MCATs. And I would crash like 2 in the afternoon. I'd be on the couch like reading. I was just like, and I'd have to
Yep.
take a nap and just pass out for 2 hours. I didn't know what the hell was going on. And yeah, and then athletically, night and day difference when I wasn't eating any carbs at all. So for me at least, and a lot of other athletes, I mean, there's a lot of like pro rugby players now that are coming to this. There's a lot of guys in New Zealand and Australia that are professional rugby players and other athletes, long distance cyclists, endurance cyclists, and things like that. A couple in South Africa, very very high level cyclists that are just absolutely crushing it doing this as well. And there's one guy who I just interviewed, guy Alex McDonald, who he wasn't a runner before this. You have to call him a runner now, but he had never run a marathon or anything like that. And he just decided to go out and run 5 marathons in 5 consecutive days without eating the entire time.
Oh,
Right. So he ate on
that's wild.
Sunday. Yeah, his last meal was on Sunday. Then he ran a full length marathon Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday he ran the Sydney Marathon. And then he was going to eat after that. He had like a big tomahawk, like all just like aging in his fridge, just ready to go. And he's like, I'm not even hungry. He just had like 2 burger patties and I called it a day,
Mhm.
and so you got tons of energy in your body. Your body's just constantly replenishing this. And when you have the carbohydrates, yeah, it'll give you energy while you're working out. And if that's all you need, then that's fine. I don't, like I said, like Tim Noakes found is like, you're not going to have you're not going to do worse in the sort of the short term, but it's the long term, you might run out of energy and you have to sort of refeed and get more carbs and things like that. So but if you're not doing any of that, you will make carbs, you will make glucose, you will make glycogen, and you'll make ketones, and you'll just have them just all day, and you won't have any sort of ups and downs and any of that sort of stuff. So I certainly prefer that, and I certainly feel better that as when I was playing sports.
Yeah, it's kind of baffling to me too, is and I did want to talk about this at one point, but it cracks me up that I'll have dietitians come up to me freaking out. Like I've literally been cussed out by a dietitian before. I'm not kidding, like swearing at me
Jeez.
because I'm eating meat and how unhealthy that is
Oh my
while
God.
she's like fat. Like she was literally not in
Mm,
shape telling me this. Freaking out probably about like my cholesterol and all these things. And I'm like, are you sure yours is better? Like you're
yeah.
eating Pop Tarts for breakfast, but somehow eggs in the morning is bad. Like I'm just
Mm,
struggling to understand your reasoning here. Um, and so I'm getting these. I had like two kind of just baffled with me, like came
mm,
up to me at a practice and started like just berating me because one of the athletes wanted to try it and they stopped eating pizza and pasta. Oh no, I'm so sorry. Like it's like at one point it wasn't even that they were eating a whole foods diet. They were literally microwaving food,
mm.
like shit food. And they had the balls to come up to me and start yelling at me. I'm like, all I told him to do is to start cooking a steak instead of having pasta at night. Like he didn't know what to cook. He didn't know how to cook.
Mm.
And so I
Yeah.
taught him, I was like, make eggs in the morning, have steak at night. If you feel like you want to have something else, some fruit, vegetables, even, sure. But like,
Mm.
you got to stop microwaving your food. Like he was a senior in high school and the kid's fat. Like he was starting to get like tubby. I'm like, this just doesn't work. Can't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is just, it's wild to see how dogmatic they are
Yeah.
with maybe even, I don't even know if it's what they've learned though. Like there's
Mm,
no way, and I hope this is wrong. I know we talked about this on my podcast, but like the information that they learned, I feel like is at least pushing them towards more whole food-esque food. Even though again, it's like we had dietitians here telling us to have, pasta and sandwiches between practices.
mhm.
So, ah, you know, struggle
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, well, that is, and it's, but they've been indoctrinated, and so they really think that what they're doing is the right thing. But if they were doing the right thing, and if their advice was right, why don't they have the results that they think other people should get? Right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, it's like, were they following their own advice? It's just like, do you follow your advice? Why should I follow your advice if you're following your advice? I want my results, not your results. you know?
Well, I think the one part that kind of still baffles me too is like, okay, well, you're in Australia, so maybe it's better, but like, the regulations and like the food pyramid and the thing that ruined like 70% of the US to where
Hmm.
they're just like live a carb-centric diet. Like that's the information that they were built off of. That was the information that
Yeah.
I ate. Like my mom pushed me towards for a really long time, who's now like, she was a nutritionist for the longest time, became a clinical nutritionist, and she was putting out this information until I started questioning her. I started tapping. Does it really make that much sense? Are you sure it makes that much sense?
Hmm.
You should try this. And when I switched to a carnivore, she was kind of like, I don't know, but coincidentally, my IBS disappeared until I
Hmm.
started eating bad foods again. And it's wild to me that you have a lot of dietitians, and I know there's a lot of really good ones out there that try to like reintegrate and learn. But again, I'm getting yelled at, but all of their information doesn't work. Look at the US. Don't look at athletes. What about the whole US as a whole? Like everyone's fat. Like I feel like we have the old photos that maybe they hate to hear about, but you look in like the 1970s, 60s, 50s, probably the 50s, everyone's in shape.
Hmm.
And it's like that was when we were using less seed oils and whatever. And it's just, it cracks me up to think that all of their information that they're utilizing now is not only making them fat, but it's making all of their clients out of shape. And even the athletes, okay, fine. The athletes aren't out of shape because they have to work like hell to get out of that hole. But it's just kind of like depressing seeing that like we're in this never ending cycle. It's like a negative feedback loop. It's just, it keeps not working, but well, let me retry again.
Hmm.
So it's baffling to me that we keep running in this circle of just like a logical thinking.
Hmm.
But well, you just got to keep going deeper. It's going to fix somehow at some point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. It's just so frustrating for me.
Yeah. Well, that's crazy that they came up and chewed you out too, especially because you were
Cussing
asking,
me
you're
out
telling,
after
yeah,
practice.
cussing you. I mean, that's completely inappropriate. I mean, they need to be at least professional and just say, hey, we have concerns about this. It's just like,
Yeah.
why do they get so personal about it? Like, what is it really doing to them for you to give somebody advice? Like, what the hell does that have to do with anything?
Well, I just told him, I was like, hey, this is what I've done and this is
Mhm.
what I'm doing. By the way, like before that, and this is the thing I've told all these dietitians, you're talking to the person that was frantically trying different diets to make sure the IBS could go away. So like
Mhm.
I did the raw vegan diet for a bit. I tried just
Mhm.
a regular vegan diet. I watched the Game Changers propaganda and got screwed after that. Like I was able to try all these different diets. The vegan diet, I lost close to 12 pounds of muscle.
Mhm.
Sure, I was lean, but I had nothing on me. My stomach felt worse than it ever had. And again, it's like I'd rather you eat
Mhm.
like vegetables than pasta and pizza and all of these things. Like I feel like at some point you have to like recognize it's like first go whole foods. I feel like that's like the gateway. You notice like most of the foods you're getting fed are just complete poison. Like you go to
Mhm.
grocery stores and you're like, it's only on like the outer circle. There's some food,
Mhm.
and then all the inside is just shit. At least in the US. Again, I haven't been to
Oh,
Australia, but it's
everywhere. Yeah.
okay. So it's everywhere. Yeah, it's just
Mhm.
like it's wild to me. And you look into the grocery stores, and again, it's just fake. It's hard to call it food. It's just like processed chemicals that you're eating. But yeah, I mean, you start going down the gateway. You start re-enjoying eggs, and you're like, holy crap, these things are great. And then you're like, well, let me have some meat. But when I jumped back on the carnivore diet, for example, just for people to recognize this athletes too, I went back on the carnivore diet. I had a proper strength training regimen. And this is like after I've been lifting for 4 or 5 years. So getting like newbie gains is just not as likely.
Mm.
And I was able to gain 10 pounds of lean muscle in 3 months.
Damn. Nice.
So it's like again, it's like you just have to walk back to things that make sense, even though again, it's like, yeah, I literally got cussed out, and I told them at like literally at that moment, I was like, I have to leave because I have other things I have to do. But I would love to sit down with you and actually talk with you about this because it's helped me. It's worked with me. And
Mhm.
like my old dietitian that I had at Purdue when I was a student was fantastic. And she was always eager and willing to work with
Mhm.
me. It's just like the newer ones that I've had to like talk with at least were just Yikes. I think it's the sooner you're out of that little like box, like right as you finish your degree, you're so obsessed and you just have that knowledge. I
Mm,
think that maybe we talked about that on my podcast, but if you learn within a small confined box of information, then you going outside of that box makes you uncomfortable and you start freaking out. And so, I pushed the bounds for her, and the dietitian kind of freaked out on me, but she never wanted to meet coincidentally. So
yeah.
that's on her. Yeah, that's on her.
Yeah. How did your buddy do? Did he end up sticking with it, and or did they
He
convince
is
him back? Yeah.
No, he's yet to go back.
Yeah,
He's yet
nice.
to go back. So I he was struggling with cooking his steak. So we actually had um we had a little cooking session like probably a week ago.
Hmm.
And I showed him how I cook my steaks. But yeah, no, ever since I showed him, he started slowly changing and morphing towards that. But yeah, he eats a primarily animal-based diet, and
Hmm.
he's doing great. And he's
Yeah.
been on that for like well over a year now. So
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
yeah, it's just funny to see that change in people. Again, it's like even my mom, who's learned all this old information, she's starting to change and she's starting to feel better. She primarily ate a vegan diet for the longest time. She would sometimes add in some fish, sometimes add in some chicken. And I'm like, Mom, you're not eating enough. And then
Hmm.
two, like you need to like reintegrate food that's like actually giving you like nutrients. And so she started, changing it. And she said her hair started feeling better. And like
Hmm.
all of these little pieces in her life were starting to, change. I'm like, all right, well, weirdly enough, it only makes too
Yeah.
much sense.
Yeah, exactly. That's great.
So,
So that was actually fairly recent. So it was like last year that these guys chewed you out. Um, did, did,
it was last year.
yeah.
Last year I got like screamed at. Yeah. Yeah.
Did
It's
they,
just wild.
that's dope. They ever walk that back, since they saw him doing well, or they just still like, "Arr, Twinkies are best."
No, I mean, even after that conversation, still pushed him to eat, like the little protein bars that you could have that are just
Mm.
like doused in sugar and shit like
Oh,
that.
real food. It's like mom used to make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he should be eating more of that. You should be making sure to have 1 to 2 sandwiches in between practice. That's literally what was pushed and said.
Jesus. How do they
So
have
no,
jobs?
they didn't.
No.
I just no. Well, I mean, they have jobs specifically because of that, which is like the frightening part. Like you
Yeah.
have to say those things to get in. I think here's my thing. For a dietitian, you should be in shape. Like, I don't know, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like maybe for like a doctor, like your schedule's hard and like you should know about nutrition and stuff like that. But like you don't have to look the part to be like phenomenal,
Hmm.
right? But like a dietitian or a nutritionist, like that's your fucking job,
Hmm.
is to tell people how to eat. So if you're eating like sweets, candy, and sugar, and all of your meals are shit and you're literally out of shape, like that's your resume is how you look to
Hmm.
me. Like it's like
Yeah.
a bodybuilding coach, that's young, like you should be in shape.
Yeah.
The older ones, okay, fine, like your 60s, 70s, but even then, like you should be in pretty good shape. You should know how to eat properly and be lean.
Hmm.
Um, to me, that's like, okay, that only makes sense. A personal trainer should look like he knows how to train himself and others. Like these
Yeah.
are things to me that are like, hey, your resume should show on you. Um, I don't know. It probably, and you could correct me if I'm wrong. It probably should be for doctors that you should be looking fairly healthy since you're trying to help people back into health. But it's just
Well,
wild to me for a dietitian.
yeah. No, I think it's fair. I mean, I've had a lot of patients say that to me, that they actually appreciate the fact that I look healthy, and say, okay, I'm happy to take your advice because like you do this and you look the part, and it's just like, all right, someone's like a heart surgeon or brain surgeon, something like that. I mean, it's just like, well, whatever. Like you need the surgery. You just want someone who can do the job.
Yeah.
But being healthy obviously is very helpful as well, because you're going to be more mental. You have more mental acuity. You're going to have more energy. You're not going to be all just stressed out and brain fog. I mean, you don't need that when you're in the middle of surgery and operating. And so, that's obviously helpful. But yeah, I mean, if you're not getting like the direct advice for that sort of lifestyle, hey, here's how you be the healthiest you can be, maybe they don't need to maybe they don't need to look the part, but it is like having, seeing your cardiologist smoke,
Sure. Yeah.
it's just
Okay.
like,
Yeah. That's a perfect example.
it's just like, well, hold on a second. What are you doing? And so, but yeah, like a nutritionist, you have to sort of wonder, it's like, okay, you're not healthy. And is that because you're following your advice or you're not following your advice? And either way, there's a problem, because if you are following your advice, then clearly your advice is bad. And if you're not following your advice, why are you not following your advice? Is it because you don't believe your own advice? You don't think that's the right way to go, or what? I mean, what the hell is going on here? And so, yeah, I mean, I think you're right. You do, your body and your physique and your health is your resume when you're in the health field. There's actually, I was visiting a friend of mine who had a practice, medical practice, and they did a lot of diet and lifestyle and, corrective health medicine, preventative medicine, trying to get people healthy. And he had sort of a nutritionist counselor sort of guy, but the guy was vegan, but he didn't push like a vegan diet, but that's just what he did himself. And so, he promoted like the diet that practice promoted, and just, helped them along and all that sort of stuff. So he wasn't like, pushing on anybody, but he just ate like a whole food diet, plant-based diet. And so I was there, whole food meat diet, and then was here whole food plant-based diet. And one of the patients came in, like I actually felt bad because they ended up letting this guy go, because they're like, he just didn't look the part. He was very frail, he was very pale and very skinny, and he just didn't look healthy. And patients started commenting, because I was there, I just drop in, and I looked healthy, and they were like, we were sort of standing next to each other. And one of the patients said to my friend whose practice it was, they're like, did you see those two next to each other? Like, that meat guy, he just looks really good. The other guy, he looks like he's dying. He looks like he's on
Yeah.
chemo or something, you know? And so they were just like, yeah, we got to let you go. You're just not fitting the part. You don't look healthy. And so people don't have confidence in taking your advice. And so I think it is important to do that. And, some of the nutritionists that I know who are now carnivore, it's because they were following their own advice and they were getting really bad results, that they started questioning their own education and saying, wait, hold on a second, this doesn't add up. I'm doing everything. Somebody said, Dr. Sarah Zaldivar. She has a PhD in nutrition, right? Nutrition and dietetics, a PhD. And she's following the exact advice that, that she taught, you know, years and years and years of study, years and years and years of school. She's now a professor. She's teaching this at a university level, and she's getting more and more overweight, more and more unwell. She's like, the hell is going on? I should be just the healthiest person on earth right now, working out, doing all this sort of stuff, just getting worse and worse. And so then she started re-examining this and went like, this was all bullshit. And so, now she's gone completely the other side. Now she's doing carnivore, but it's, you know, it's it's difficult when you don't even see the problem with your own advice, and you don't even see that your own advice is causing harm, and then you keep pushing it and get angry when someone goes away from that. Maybe it's just sort of you're stepping on their toes, because they're like, that advice sucks, not listening to that shit, and you go do something else and get better advice, and then they're like, well, that could be my ass, I could lose my job because people are doing something else. I don't know, but it's a bit insecure, I'd say.
Well, it's disheartening. I think that's the frustrating part for me is do you know who Dr. Mike is? He's pretty big on YouTube. He's got a big podcast.
He's
Um,
he's a nutrition or a sports scientist or something like that. Or
he's a general practicing doctor, I think, if that's what it's
okay,
called. Yeah, just a
I think
general
I've come
doctor.
across him. I don't think I've
So
seen too much, but I think I have. Yeah, come
he
across him.
he recently had a podcast. I forgot the doctor he brought on, who was, I guess, controversial, but he brought on this specific like PhD dietitian. And again, like I'm midway through, and they bring up that she's this PhD, and like she again looks like she's like 15 pounds. I could just blow at her and she would snap in half. But like
Mm.
she's this very world-renowned dietitian, and of course she follows the vegan diet. I'm like, dude, it's just like it doesn't make sense to me.
Mhm.
Again, it's like the doctors that have the farthest PhDs, again, it's like I don't know if you're just like you're so deep that you just keep going thinking that like this makes
Yeah.
sense. But like how many pills is she taking? It's kind of like the Brian Johnson thing to me. I'm like, like this guy's spending $2 million a year to
Mm,
be like to live forever, but he's on this vegan diet and he's taking 120 pills a day.
yeah.
Yeah, that really sounds like you're living. How long does
Mm,
that take you to hoss down 120 pills? It's the
mhm.
dumbest thing I've ever heard. I'm like, again, like how many of those pills could just be like wiped away if you just had like a nice piece of steak in front of you? Like
Yeah.
that was my question. Like he talks about like analyzing all of his like blood lipids and all of these. He just goes through all of these things, but like, have you yet to try it something else outside of that diet? Like you say, you have every calorie has to fight for its life. You're like, okay, but you have this like you've glob in front of you. Like really, that's gonna save you. That's gonna like allow you to live to 120. It's just stupid. So I think the reason why I brought that up, it's like frustrating because like even a lot of the pills and the things that they would have to take, like the B12 and stuff like that, to like because you're not eating red meat, like is that even digestible? Does your body, and you could probably speak into this, like, are all the things that you'd have to take because you're not eating red meat, are you even able to like digest it in your body, able to like take in all of the B12, K2, all of that stuff based off of all the pills that you're taking that hopefully aren't laced with like synthetic crap on top of it? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, how is that? You have a
Yeah.
PhD and this is what you're doing. Like, it's frustrating.
Yeah, that's always the thing that was a bit surprising to me that PhDs in nutrition or just nutritionists in general could recommend a diet or subscribe to a diet that was devoid of nutrients, right? Like it's in the name, right? It's just like you're a
Yeah.
nutritionist. It's about nutrients, and you're saying this is the best diet. Oh, but it's lacking like 30 things that you have to supplement for. Well, that's not really a good diet then, is it? The Italian pediatrics board, I forget the name. It was one of their big groups of pediatricians. They made a public statement about vegetarian and vegan diets. They said these are absolutely inappropriate diets for children and really anyone. Is that any diet that is lacking in even one nutrient is a bad diet and it is not appropriate for a growing child and can cause a lot of harm. So they have publicly come out and condemned a vegan diet and said you cannot feed your kids this crap. It's not. Now they're not like advocating for a carnivore diet. They're just advocating for the inclusion of meat, like a whole food omnivorous diet. But people say, no, you got to go plant-based. And they're saying absolutely not. You cannot do that. You have to eat meat. It's just, there's no avoiding it. It's like, well, you can supplement. Well, no, you can't, because there's a paper that came out last year that estimated there was like 51,000 nutrients in red meat, and we don't have names for a lot of these things, and many of them don't exist in plants. So we know about of the nutrients we know about, B12 can't get away from that, but there's a number of others like K2, DHA, EPA, D3, and retinol, all these sorts of things. Well, the plant versions convert in. Yeah, I mean, there's so many mixed reviews on that. There's so many things that say it's like a 1% conversion. Others that say it doesn't convert at all, or even like ALA actually lowers DHA, for instance. That's the ALA is the omega-3 in plants, and they actually lower the animal-based omega-3 DHA, which is the one you want. And some say that you may be as much as 5% conversion. So I mean, there's all this mixed nonsense, but you can't get away from B12. And there are all a number of nutrients we don't even have names for that seem to be essential that you have to get from meat that you can't get from plants, don't even have names. And then things like carnitine, which is conditionally required because, well, that's a non-essential amino acid. Not for everybody. Only 70% of people make enough carnitine. 30% of people, literally one third of the planet, don't make carnitine or enough carnitine anyway. And so they need it from their diet. So it's very strange to me that they would just say, oh yeah, plant-based. And that, yeah, I know the dude I was talking about, the Brian Johnson guy, he and he's even said that he's not doing a vegan diet because he thinks it's the best. It's just that's his choice. That's how he wants to live. And so he's taking supplements for that. And it's like you're doing all this, you're spending millions of dollars, and then you go for this diet that's based on an ideology rather than the data in front of you. That was a bit of a weird disconnect, but at least he was honest about it. He's just like, yeah, no, this is just personal choice. I'm not saying this is the best diet, but that's just what I do, which is really funny. But yeah, I mean, how can you call yourself a nutritionist if you advocate for a diet that is lacking in nutrients? It makes no sense to me.
Well, especially if we're coming out,
Mm.
like if there's so much data coming out with like how muscle mass is like one of the number one indicators of longevity.
Mhm.
And then all of these dietitians are like, again, like you said, they look like cancer patients. They have no muscle on them, or they're literally skinny fat. It's like
Mhm.
you have no protein in your diet, and like you're trying to tell people to like be healthier, but like what path are you leading them down? So like it starts to get like frightening for me. I'm like, I just don't understand it anymore, to the point where it's just like I'm good, just you keep your information, you keep all your papers, because they're definitely working out for you. Like I
Mhm.
don't know. Like and we even talked about like the studies and stuff like that, where it's, with the church group that was just kind of running the whole thing. It's just kind
Mhm.
of it's wild to not look at the pieces that are kind of laid down in front of you. And honestly, the biggest one for me, even if people don't want to get into that and they feel like that's kind of like tinfoil hat, just look at them, just look at the dietitian as the perfect example. And it's like, are they just hammering protein powders to make sure that they can get enough protein? Is that really what you want to do? Is just live off of like liquids?
Mhm. Yeah.
It's just the whole thing starts to feel backwards to me, because like again, like I started getting off the vegan diet, but I was still hammering like protein shakes because I need enough protein to this or that. It's like, or you could just eat real animal-based foods, and you don't have to hammer all of that crap, and you'll
Mhm.
feel better. Most people feel pretty bad after a protein shake or feel kind of bloated. I wonder why. What's
Mhm.
in there? Like, what is in there?
Yeah.
Hopefully it's what they tell you, but usually not.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
It's like, dude.
Yeah, that's another thing. If it's on a bag, I mean, you have no idea. If you see a piece of meat, it's a piece of meat, or even a piece of broccoli. It's a piece of broccoli, right? And so
Yeah.
you can at least make an informed decision. Otherwise, you're just trusting whatever the hell is in there, and there aren't like iron filings and arsenic that have sort of slipped their way in.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, but that's the thing too, is that a lot of people say that, well, when you go to a carnivore or meat diet, you really it's just the difference between going from a processed food junk diet to then cleaning up your act. But wasn't the case for you, was it? I mean, you tried all these different whole food approaches, trying all these different sorts of things to try to fix your IBS, but also to be a top athlete, and perform at your best, which you have to. I mean, there's no wiggle room. If you're not feeling your best, it can affect your performance. And so, yeah, maybe walk us through that. Like, wow, what were you eating before, and how are you feeling? And then sort of what was your progression with diets?
Yeah. Yeah. So again, I'll just call it the standard American diet. That's what I started on for the longest time. So I would eat mac and cheese at night, or, pasta in between practices. Breakfast was cereal. And of course I felt horrible after that. I didn't know why, but um, I went from I went from whole milk, or sorry, I went from like 1 to 2% milk to oat milk, thinking that would help me. And
Mhm.
so I think I just like slowly thinking again, like listening to the documentaries and all these people around me. I was like, okay, well, like I'll just start integrating more plant foods, because, my mom made us a pretty like whole foods diet.
Mhm.
But the farther away, which was like, okay, it sustained me. And then, the more that I got to make my own foods, so like middle school, it started like affecting me more. Still eating like semi whole foods, but again, it's like you start adding the Pop Tarts and the little things that, well, they're just good, and it's just again, excuse my language, but it's like mouth porn, like for
Mhm.
people. Like all you're searching for is like the most savory foods 24/7, and so it's hard to switch to just like a whole foods diet. But yeah, so I went from the standard American diet, and then I kept going more plant based. So when I got to college, um, this is plant-based, I guess, but like I would have some eggs in the morning, but I would always make sure every single meal had to have some sort of greens. So I used to hammer raw kale, raw spinach,
Mhm.
uh, broccoli. I didn't even like it. I was just like, I know it's good for me. So I just hammered it. And
Mhm.
so that's what I actually ended up going to for like 2.5 years was that diet, was just heavy carbs. I would have some meat. I didn't stay away from meat, but it was just, here's a little bit of like 6 to 8 ounces of meat. And then the rest of the plate was just vegetables, because that's what I was pushed towards. And then from there, I gravitated. I watched Game Changers. So if people
Mhm.
know what I'm talking about, it was a documentary on Netflix. Um, and I tried going completely vegan for I did it for 3 months.
Jeez.
And again, lost probably 12, probably around 12 pounds of muscle. Like
Jesus.
I was still around the 12, 13% body fat.
Mhm.
But you can tell, just like similar to a lot of these people, like I just started looking skinny fat. It just kind of it didn't look good. It looked kind of gross.
Mhm.
And then that didn't work. My IBS is like at this point, like all time high, spiking. Like I'm living off of Imodium essentially at this point.
Mhm.
And so, after after a few months, I just couldn't take it. So I brought back some eggs, some meat. I would do like chicken and stuff like that, thinking that it was leaner because I was still terrified of fat like everyone else, because that's what I was taught. Still cooking with olive oil because I didn't learn that fact of like cooking with it was not great. So went from that for a bit, and then after Tokyo, the 2021 Olympics, that's when I just started listening to a different, because like at some point, this is always what I've had to go through. So like I ran into a similar like dogmatic thinking for like my patellar tendonitis. I had it for like 8 years. Tried the standard thing: go to your athletic trainer, get your knees blown out by doing too many back squats in the weight room. It's just like it was the never ending cycle. So I had to go and change things myself to fix it. And all these things kind of happened after Tokyo. And so after Tokyo, I started listening to Paul Saladino because I just kind of randomly ran into him. Thank God for that. And then I
Mhm.
started slowly changing. And again, like the change, and maybe this is something for people to understand, like that change still wasn't easy because like my stomach's still trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And so it probably took me like 2 months for my stomach to start like leveling out and chilling out. So I started integrating eggs, and then I was going ground meat because it was just a little bit easier for me at the start. I don't know if you
Mhm.
found that for people to start with ground meat's a little bit easier. But I started doing that. And then once I really committed to it, I did the 6 months of just straight chuck meat. And then from there, reintegrated a couple of other things like some fruits, and then I would do like avocados here and there, but not super consistently. Um, but yeah, that was kind of the transition for me. And just like another piece for athletes specifically, and especially if you're on a high level, such as myself, to where you're getting tested. We were talking about protein powders and supplements. Like you get tested by USADA, you get tested by WADA. It's scary. Like it's a scary thing. Well, I like they say they're safe and they say they're not being mixed and tested. That is the hope. But like there are
Mhm.
still stories of people getting screwed. There's an Australian swimmer who couldn't go to the Olympics because of this,
Oh,
the
geez.
last cycle. So it's like, again, um, you don't have to supplement as much or at all if you're eating a diet that like provides you the things that you actually need. And obviously there might be dietitians in the comment section freaking out, but again, like once I got onto this diet, like there was the need. I still take creatine.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know how you feel about that, but I take creatine monohydrate, just kind of throw it in for like I guess there's been so many studies that I kind of lean into it. Paul's a fan of it, so I was like, all right. So he explained his reasoning. He likes it. You can, the more the better, I guess. And I guess it doesn't hurt. But again, it's like I don't really take anything outside of that because it's
Mhm.
hard to trust the supplements that you're taking, because you can get kind of flagged for a banned substance. And guess what? If you get hit for something, that's 6 months plus out of your sport.
Mhm. Yeah,
Does it
jeez.
sound worth it? Yeah. Does it sound worth it? Not so much. So, that was one big thing that was actually kind of a reliever for me. I don't take protein powders. I get a shit ton of protein. I don't need more. Like I'm good. So that was like a big part for me. That was like very relaxing. was like, okay, I know I'm not going to get popped.
Hmm.
So like that's great. I'm obviously not taking steroids, so that's not a problem for me. But like, that was a big appeal again to this diet versus the vegan diet where I'm trying to supplement everything.
Yeah.
So again, like if people are even thinking of just going for like a whole foods diet, like just lean towards the animal side for athletes at least, and even non-athletes, you feel a fuck ton better. But the
Hmm.
more protein that you can get in all these more whole foods, animal-based foods, again, the supplements just start disappearing on your shelf. So that was one big appeal for me was like lowering the stress of getting popped for something because I'm taking, you know, three different protein powders.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's freaky too, and definitely not worth it. I did wonder, when you were on a vegan diet, were you taking protein supplements then, or are you just trying to do it all with beans and legumes and all that sort of stuff?
I was doing a lot of beans, like beans and white rice. Yeah, it's a
Mm.
great, like a whole protein, like dinner. I'm like, okay. But yeah, I would do like the vegan protein, stuff like
Okay.
that with the oat milk.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ugh.
it sucked. It was horrible. And then like again,
Yeah.
like you're trying to get so creative with like all of these sauces too because everything tastes horrible. I'm like baking the hell out of these cauliflowers to make it taste crunchy or like again, it's like the funny part for me is I was eating the Beyond Meat, like a bunch of it too,
Mm.
which was
Jeez.
like again, and you come out it comes out that like these things are horrible for you. Like,
Yeah.
well, I mean, there's a reason why I felt like shit for three
Yeah. It's
months,
like,
but
well,
yeah, and they're trying to like Beyond Meat. It's like if you want to be vegan and you're trying to feel like morally great about it, why are you trying to replicate meat? Like, so you just think about like eating an animal while you're not eating an animal. It feels backwards to me. So
yeah.
yeah, I don't know. The whole thing was just yeah, you couldn't get enough protein, even with the protein powder, unless I was probably like taking like three shakes a day on top of what I was eating.
Yeah.
So
Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor, Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right, thanks guys. Yeah,
yeah.
and losing 12 pounds of muscle while doing everything right and taking supplements and things like that. I mean, they say that it's just like, well, there's studies that come out and say anything, but one that the vegans try to prop out all the time is it's like, well, if you're as long as you're getting enough, grams of protein, then you don't have any sort of loss of muscle mass and you still gain muscle and all that sort of stuff. It's a big if. It's a big if. If you can get enough grams of protein and if they're bioavailable too, because you're not necessarily absorbing these things. And then you got crude protein and real protein, the amount of protein that they say are in some sort of plants or vegan products is not necessarily actual protein. It's just nitrogen. They calculate the amount of nitrogen, put a mass spectrometer. This is how much nitrogen there is, and so they say, well, every molecule of nitrogen that is a part of an amino acid, but not necessarily. It could be nitrogen in another form, and so they're just saying that's all protein, and it's not, and that's crude protein. But the real protein is a much smaller number, or at least a smaller number. And then how much of that is bioavailable? And like, okay, well, what about the protein isolate as a shake? It's like, okay, but you're not getting this out of your food is the is the thing. And even then, like you're saying, you were getting a lot of protein and it just wasn't enough. It was just slowing you down, if anything.
Yeah, well, again, too, the concerning part was like I also had to watch because you're eating all these foods, and again, like I felt bloated, I felt horrible, and so it's like I had to be careful of what I was eating when I was eating, and the problem was it's like even if I was eating perfectly, like I'm super gassy, like talk about even smelling bad too. Then like
Mm.
it's just it's the funniest thing. If you talk to my teammate who was my roommate back then. He was like, I looked like a scientist in the kitchen because I'm trying to do anything to this food to make it like palatable. And
Hmm.
like I feel like again, I feel like there's like bodybuilders, right, that have, super like a fuck ton of muscle mass. But the problem that we're not a lot of these people look at, like, well, like look at me, I'm on a vegan diet. You're also taking steroids. So it doesn't, it's not a good argument. Because
Hmm.
then you look at the athletes that are vegan, and it's, again, you either run into the skinny fat problem,
Hmm.
or they're like they just don't look that in shape. Again, like
Hmm.
like in my mind, I'm looking for like lean with a lot of muscle mass. That's obviously not cheating, but a lot of the people that are eating whole foods or leaning towards that animal based side of things just look a lot healthier. I had a podcast with a friend of mine, who also, because of me, transitioned to like an animal based diet. And again, it's like you could see if he was able to show you the transition of his body composition. Like he's just jacked, he's just ripped all the time. He feels
Yeah.
phenomenal. Like, and again, he loves like being able to make. He's a great chef, but the foods that he's able to make with an animal based diet, you call it restrictive, but it's when you watch his food, it's the last thing to me that comes to mind is restrictive.
Mm.
So, again, it's, I think people just need to recognize the more you center your diets around, animal-based foods, the healthier you'll feel, the stronger you'll feel. And then again, you take out all these supplements. You ask him, he's not taking a single supplement. So it's just like you lean towards things that are just more logical. So less is
Mm.
more in my mind. The less that we can start um, hopping on all of these things. Because again, it's in the end, it's all business. So, they want you to kind of be sucked on to 14 different protein shakes because it makes them money. But
Mm.
yeah, I lean towards things that are a little bit more logical to me, I'll say, which is just eating a whole, animal-based diet that just puts me in just a way better position to compete and just feel better.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
have you gotten others on your team or athletes you've known, or it sounds like a few of them have come on a carnivore or more meat-based diet as well. Are a lot of
Yeah.
people coming around to this, and how are they doing?
I think it's just more conversations. Again, like
Mm.
I even had people in my circle that would kind of first attack me for what I was doing, because it's always that fear that's so stupid you're not eating vegetables. You're like, you're gonna have high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and you're gonna die soon because you have clogged arteries. You're like, cool, like keep saying that. I have no IBS problems anymore. So like there's nothing you can say to me that's going to push me back into that direction, because it's not true. It's clearly not true, and you can throw a million studies at me, like they're not working. And my
Mhm.
study is look at the US population. So,
Mhm.
I mean, as we talked about, my coach started leaning towards more of an animal-based diet. He did carnivore for like a week or two. But I think he wasn't feeling amazing doing that.
Mhm.
But as he told me towards the end, I wish he was a little bit more connected with you, but he was like, oh, I was thinking of it more as a diet. And
Mhm.
so he wasn't eating enough food. But like
Right.
within 5 days, I think he lost, 10 days, he lost 8 pounds.
Yeah, wow.
And so the doctors freaked out. But my question to them would be, he like, if you lose 8 pounds of visceral fat, should we be that concerned? Like, the doctor's freaking out that you've lost weight, but like, what is the weight? Is it muscle mass? Because I doubt it's muscle mass. Like, if your
Yeah.
belly's starting to disappear, like that's only a positive to me. So yeah, it's like a lot of people within my general circle, like we're leaning towards like 15, 20 people have actually like pushed more towards in like an animal based diet.
Mhm.
No one's, I feel like it's hard for a lot of people to commit to the carnivore diet, just because that is like, oh, I have to eat
Bigger.
meat 24/7. Yeah, it's just like a
Yeah.
bigger commitment. But when I say animal based, okay, like I don't have to eat spinach in the morning. Yeah, it sucks anyways. And it's like a lot of those vegetables are just like doused in glyphosate.
Mm.
And like maybe even to your point, like even a lot of the fruits, like it says organic, but like how close is it to the crop that has glyphosate blasted within it? Like it's hard to know. These are things that at least I've kind of heard is like, you know, how separated is organic and non-organic.
Mm.
Like
Oh, they're the
is
same.
there one bad breeze that goes and then like you're screwed already? All the organics, hope they just have a label on it. It is kind of hard to trust. And that
Mm.
is the frustrating part that I run into how much can you trust the labels? How much can you trust the companies? Because
Yeah.
like we are leaned into a situation to where it's like, and again, like the tinfoil hat comes back on, but you run into like a crony capitalist-esque situation. It's not capitalism that's running the system, it's
Hmm.
crony capitalism. So it's like the government's propping up bad companies.
Yeah.
So then like you can't trust what's really being thrown at you. So I'll take the tinfoil hat,
Yeah.
but I've had a lot of people. My mom was one good example. I know she'll be watching. So, hey mom. My dad started leaning back towards it. A lot of friends that made a pretty big switch. And again, it's like the switch goes from eating Pop Tarts, pizza, like all of these things that really just aren't that great, like synthetic foods, things that are just like out of a microwave to just food that, oh, I'm sorry, you do have to cook it. Like it's going to take a little bit of time, but I mean, get a non-toxic air fryer and you're already in a better situation. Or like there's just so many ways to do it. Like to me, there's no excuse because like health should be number one.
Hmm.
But within my immediate circle, it's around like 20 people that are starting to understand why this is kind of a better way. And then once they try it, they're like, yeah, it just makes too much sense.
Hmm.
Like how good you feel, it just makes too much sense. And then again, if I have a dietitian starting to cuss me out, I go, it's fine. Just look at your US population. That's your sample. Do
Hmm.
you feel confident with that? Because then you bring the sample of like, sure, it's a smaller group that's starting to like build, but like then you look at all the carnivore or animal-based people and they all look, there's no one that's obese, is my point.
Hmm.
And a lot
Yeah.
of health markers, autoimmune disorders, like people are getting healthier, people are feeling better. So it's a hard argument to make for me personally for them to, really push. They might again throw a lot of studies, but uh, maybe the studies aren't that great. So
Yeah.
new ones
Absolutely.
need to come out.
Yeah. Maybe they've been paid for by the people trying to sell us this garbage in the first place, which is most of them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can look at the US population and say, we've gone away from meat and more towards this plant-based problem, and we've gotten fatter and sicker than we've ever been in our history. And then you just look at India. People say, "Oh, the blue zones, they eat all these plants, and they live much longer, and they're so much more healthy." Well, what about the anti-blue zones? There's places where they eat a lot of plants, a lot of whole food plants and vegan diets and vegetarian diets, and they're way less healthy and have a much shorter lifespan, like the entire subcontinent of India. They eat average of 3 kgs of meat a year, right?
Yeah.
That's like I mean, I went, yeah, I mean, you go to like a Brazilian steak, like a steakhouse,
Yeah.
you putting that down in a day. And and then 20 years ago, they were eating about 5 kilos of meat per person per year. Now, some of those people were carrying the weight because a lot of people weren't eating any meat
Yeah.
whatsoever. And so then when they dropped like 20 years ago to now, they've actually gotten worse. They've gotten higher rates of metabolic disease, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, cardiovascular disease. Like it's something like 1 in 4 people in India will die of a heart attack, and 1 in 3 men will die of a heart attack. They're all plant-based, right? I spoke to a guy who's a doctor over in India. He's an emergency doctor, and he's saying that the sickest people that come into his ER are all the vegans and vegetarians. And obviously people that eat processed plant foods are even worse, but that's all vegan and vegetarian, and it's all plant-based crap. And he said he treated vegetarian vegan kid who's 17 years old and came in with a freaking heart attack, like a heart attack at 17 years old. And we're trying to say that this is the best way to go. Like, kid's not eating meat. Like, you can't blame the meat on that, right?
Well, he just wasn't doing the vegan diet right.
Well, that's it. Yeah, in India, yeah, the Hindu, yeah, Indian Hindu. Yeah, well, he wasn't doing it right, and yeah, and you're right, he wasn't, because he had a freaking heart attack. So like whatever he was doing was wrong. And he was saying that India now has 30% of its population have been diagnosed with diabetes. 30% have been just diagnosed. I mean, how rural is that country? There's so many people living these rural populations that have very little access to medicine. So they may never be diagnosed. And so how many people are undiagnosed? But 30% of the population is only 9% in America, right? You have 3 times the rate of diabetes in India. And that gives you huge risk factors for heart disease and everything else. And but when you consider the population of India, it's something around like 1.2 billion people.
Yeah.
30% is a massive, massive number. I mean, you're talking around 400 million people diagnosed with diabetes in India. That's more than the population of the United States, all with diabetes, confirmed diagnosed diabetes, and they're all plant-based. They're not eating a lot of meat. And so people say to me, it's like, well, if plants are so bad and meat's so good, explain India. I'm like, you explain India. It's like India explains me. Like they don't eat meat, they eat a bunch of plants, and they're very, very sick. They have some of the highest rates of malnutrition and chronic disease in the world. And now 17-year-olds are having heart attacks. Some doctor I saw online said, well, the reason we weren't having, it was actually, he was critiquing a clip from Paul Saladino, and Saladino was saying, it's like, we weren't having heart attacks in the 1800s. We didn't have these chronic diseases. We didn't have these until the 20th century, and we're eating way more meat. And that's true. And this guy was just like, oh, well, that's nonsense. People just weren't living long enough to get these diseases. 17 is not long enough, really. Like, what the hell's wrong with your brain?
Yeah.
And of course they were. I mean, the minimum age to run for president is 35, and that was a rule that came up in the 1700s. So that's the minimum. And so if people were dying in their 30s, this is a pretty dumb minimum. It should have been 13 or something like that. It was, oh, venerable
Yeah.
man of 17, and of course not. That's nonsense. It's just people died in infancy much more, so it brought the average down. But when people lived to adulthood, they on average lived a very similar lifespan to people today. And all the founding fathers, they all died in their 80s and 90s unless they were killed by something. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, you just look up a historical figure and just see how long they lived.
Yeah.
Um, it's most of them are going to be more than 30 if they died of old age. In
Mm.
fact, none of
Yeah.
them will have died of old age in their 30s. So,
Yeah.
saying that, oh, you're not going to see this because they just died too soon. I mean, that is an ignorance that borders on the miraculous. I mean, you really have to try to just not know about that and just not think properly. Minimum age for a president, 35. Oh, they were just dying at 32. Really? Then why 35? Where'd that come from? I mean, Ben Franklin was
Yeah.
64 uh, on the outset of the Revolutionary War. I mean, it's just people just don't think,
Yeah.
and it's very shocking. Um, but I
I
was going to
actually
say,
got to
I'm sorry, go
uh,
on.
I was gonna just jump in really quickly just on the
Yeah,
blue zones. Like
yeah,
that again, I've been to thankfully, I've been to Japan 4 times now.
hmm
And that's one of their like favorite propped up blue zones.
hmm
And they're saying they're eating primarily like vegetables and like this whole dude, I've been there. They eat
hmm
nose to tail. Like
yeah,
every time I've gone there, I've eaten either liver, like you name it, I've had it there. Like and every meal is based around the fish that they caught or the animals that they butchered. So it's like I didn't have that many vegetables in Japan. And honestly, felt phenomenal there.
hmm
So it's just kind of funny again, like you go to these places and it's not what they're telling you. Like
no,
you actually, and I was going into restaurants that are in the neighborhoods. That's what I like to do.
yeah,
Let me go in the neighborhoods and see what this place looks like. Funny enough, it was all animal-based foods, all animal-based foods. And
yeah,
yeah, they had some vegetables, but that's not what their diets were surrounded by. Like it was just a complete lie. Like I'm
yeah,
literally sitting there eating um what did I had like eel heart one of the times I was there. Super
random,
cool. Super
yeah,
random. But I was like,
yeah.
yeah, I'll try it. Why not? This is sick. I'm not gonna be able to do this again. So let's have eel heart. But
No,
yeah,
no,
it's
no one's
fun.
serving eel heart. Yeah, you have to get that when you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. So it's again like I get to go to these places and actually see what they're eating, and a majority of it is surrounded by um, animal-based foods, which is really cool to see.
Awesome.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's cool. Well, cool. I just want to say one last thing before we wrap up. It's just on the creatine. I have no problem with creatine. My only thing with
Okay.
creatine is that there's a ton in meat, especially red meat. If you're eating predominantly red meat, you'll get 5 grams a day easily
Yeah.
just from eating the
Yeah.
red meat. Is more better to a point, but I think that you get past that point, probably not. At least that was what our biochemistry professor said. Back when I was back when I was in my undergrad. Now, granted, he said that the whole bed state, fasting state. So I mean, I didn't see how. I think he got that one wrong, but that was just the dogma of the day. But he was just saying, it was like, look, I mean, this is used in these reactions, and yes, you need enough of it, and if you don't have enough of it, it's going to be a rate limiting step, and then yeah, you're going to hold yourself back. But if you have enough, past that point isn't going to speed that reaction. It's just going to make sure you have enough substrate. And what he was saying too is it actually drew water into the cells as well. So it can make you look bigger, but really what it was is it was sort of filling up with water weight. And so that didn't necessarily do you any favors as an athlete, because it could you're just sort of adding on a bit of extra water weight, and it could slow you down just with the extra weight. So that was he was saying. I'm pretty agnostic to it. I think it's just if people want to do it and they feel better doing it, then go for it. If they try a month off of it and say they actually feel really good and maybe I've lost 5 pounds of water weight, fine. Um, when you're doing body scans, the water in your muscle cells will be counted as muscle. So say like, oh, look, I have more muscle, but is it muscle or is it more water in your muscle? So that's sort of difficult to tell as well. But I certainly don't think it's unsafe, because we use this in TBI and concussions. We give people up to 60 grams a day for prolonged periods of time to recover from traumatic brain injuries and concussions. So I don't think that it's horrible. I mean, I remember when it first came out, they were trying to spook people about it because they said like, some athletes like died of dehydration and it crystallized in their organs and all that sort of stuff. Don't know about the crystallization part, but a couple of people did die who were on creatine. But was it because of the creatine, or was it because they were collegiate wrestlers who were trying to drop 30 pounds in 2 days and had sweatsuits and garbage bags on and were on the exercise bike in a sauna and not drinking water and chewing tobacco and spitting constantly and taking diuretics? Maybe that had something to do with it as well. No, creatine, shut it down. So yeah, I don't have a problem with it. And if people, I don't take it myself. I don't really take, no, I don't take any supplements. It's really just meat and water. And I like that too. I just like just going about my day and not having to worry about it.
Yeah.
And I've always just had very good results with that.
Yeah.
And I tried adding in like BCAAs, which when I was on a sort of a more omnivorous diet, felt that was huge for me. That was a big change. I felt so much better with my workouts, and especially like if I was playing like a tournament, you play like 6 games in a day, you're getting worn out by the end, you're going into the finals, you take some BCAAs, I'm like, just feel like I'm fresh first game out of the box. I'm like, yeah, let's go. And then now I take it, I'm like, all right, let's see if this adds anything. It was like, nope, feel way worse. It was much
Mm.
better before. And so, that was it. But if you try it and you take the creatine and you feel it helps, go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of hard to know, to be honest. It's hard for me to recognize or feel a difference,
Mhm.
but maybe that's because I already get so much anyways that
Mhm.
I might be good. But yeah, it's again, less is more. So the more I can take things out, I've got like 3 months of my collegiate career. So or not my collegiate career, my diving career overall. So
Mm.
I'll probably just stay consistent. Yeah, because I'm done after this Olympic cycle.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And then, I'll get to go elsewhere and, start something new. It's time
Nice.
for me, but yeah, I'll probably take that out then and just again fall into the diet and
Yeah.
recognize that that's again, you can't outrun, you can't outwork a bad diet. So thankfully I've finally recognized that. And so even calories in, calories out, it's like eat eat high quality foods and you won't even have to like really pay attention. Like again, that would be sorry, just we'll wrap it up here. But
That's
the
fine.
last thing I would say for people is like I used to try to like track all my calories and make sure I was like locked in perfectly, but like I don't do that anymore. And
Mhm.
I have just as much my body fat percentage is the same if not lower.
Mhm.
And I've way more muscle mass and I feel a lot better. And I don't track at all. Zero
Yeah.
tracking. I just eat real food to satiation and then I'm good. So, just the final thing for athletes. So you don't have to get eating disorder, like
Hmm.
just lean into really healthy foods and you won't have to just like stress over what you're putting in
Yeah.
because the output's going to be a lot better. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's great. So, well, thank you very much for taking the time. I didn't realize this was your last cycle.
Yeah. So
Um,
that,
if I can ask, what are your plans after you finish your diving career? Do you know yet, or what are your plans?
it's up in the air, but some form of coaching. I have a training business that's kind of surrounded by the niche of diving.
Hmm.
But once I'm done, I'm gonna lean into climbing, obsessed with climbing. And
Nice.
so if I can train divers and climbers and kind of just build that community as much as I can, because again, you find these little niche sports, they don't have the same amount of like funding that like football has, for example. And so the training just doesn't look as good.
Mm,
So I always want to stay an athlete. I think that's just something that has to stay for me. So I'm going to see how far I can get into climbing and
mhm.
build on that. And then, yeah, just train people and make sure I can, keep helping people be as physically fit as possible.
Nice. Well, that's awesome. And you can climb up cliffs and then dive off of them and then do it again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
There
a
you
new
go.
sport. It's a new
Yeah,
sport.
yeah,
I'll make it.
exactly.
No vegans allowed though.
Cliff climbing, diving. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, no vegans. Well, if you started, it's your rules. So there you
Yep.
go. Yeah,
There's that.
they wouldn't make it to the top anyway. Not more than once. So yeah, like
Yeah.
right. Well, awesome, man. It was great to have you on. It was great talking to you and hearing your story. Really appreciate you taking the time, and especially when you're coming up on the Olympics. That's a big training day ahead of you, I'm sure. Where can people find you and learn more about you and follow you?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. I'd say so you can like the podcast we had. I have a podcast called the Performance Playbook Podcast on YouTube. And then you can just type in Brando Loschiavo into Instagram and you can find me there. But those are as of right now. I'm not a big Twitter guy, so
Hmm.
you got me on YouTube and Instagram. So those are my two spots. So
Awesome.
if you guys are interested in training, DM me and we can chat.
Perfect. We'll put those up in the description. People can find more about you there. Brandon, thanks a lot, man. It's appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thank you very much for taking the time out to listen to what I had to say. If you like it, then please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and podcast. And if you're on YouTube, then please hit that little bell and subscribe, and that'll let you know anytime I have a new video out, which should be every week, if not more. And if you could share this with your friends, that would help me get the word out and let me know that you like what I'm doing. Thanks again, guys.